Hi, and welcome to this presentation of People's Plastic Revolution. We're an organisation of people that not only like to talk about things, doesn't everybody, but also an organisation that likes to do things. I see so many organisations out there saying they're doing the right thing, but not actually taking that forward. Not actually doing something and having the evidence that they've done something. Speaking is one thing, but let's face it, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. My name's Steve Wakefield, and the reason I joined People's Plastic Revolution was not for me, but was for my daughter and my 3 grandchildren. Because what we're facing today is something that my generation, and perhaps your generation, is something that we really haven't got to worry about too much. Although it's affecting the planet right now, it's going to affect it a lot more in the future. And for that, I think we owe something to the future generations. And I'm hoping you feel the same. Planet Earth is beautiful. It really is, and so outstanding. Looking at it from outer space, this single drop within this vastness that contains so much life in our oceans, in our rivers, in our forests, and all over the countryside. It is a fabulous place, and one that I would like to leave in a lot cleaner than when I actually came onto the planet all those years ago in 1957. So what is it we stand for at People's Plastic Revolution? Well, it is an environment that is free of plastic waste. Laudable, I know, something that some people think it's impossible. But to be honest, it's not impossible. What I'm going to tell you about today is something you already know about. I know you do. But it's just being able to, as you have said, close the loop. Because whilst plastic has some fantastic uses, and it could be argued is one of man's greatest inventions, it's something that nature has not yet caught up with. We're actually, in our throwaway society, poisoning our planet. And again, it's not something new. We all know that this is happening. What we're struggling to do is come together and find a way of solving this problem. But we can solve the problem if everybody steps up to the plate. And I believe that now is the time to do that. These pictures say 1,000 words. But it doesn't take that much action to solve this problem. So, are you willing to step on the first step of that journey with us? You know, it's phenomenal. Mankind and the brain, the huge brain that have gone behind solving so many problems. And what we've done to do that, it was only 150 years ago, 160 years ago, that plastic or celluloid was first discovered. It really, and until the 1950s, after the Second World War, nothing was really done with plastics other than discovering new and wonderful ways of producing the material. Then in the 1950s, things started to move. But at that point, we weren't a throwaway society, were we? What we did then is we fixed things if things broke. We made do with things. But more and more, as plastic has become more used so much more, in so many more things, we've developed this need for plastic. To the point where anything that is made nowadays has some plastic components in it. And there are very, very good reasons to that. The problem is, what we didn't foresee in the 50s, and the 60s, and the 70s, and the 80s, and the 90s, was that once we used the plastic, we simply threw it away. Why did we throw it away? Well, we were doing what we've been doing for thousands upon thousands of years. If once something was of no use, we either buried it, burnt it, or threw it into the nearest river. Nothing has really changed, because that's exactly what we're doing today. Only Mother Earth now needs help. Or more to the point, we need help if we want to continue to live on Mother Earth. Because plastic is slowly but surely choking our world. Just to give you one example, that coffee cup that you get when you're in Starbucks or Costa or one of the various coffee shops, and you take a takeaway plastic cup, you drink your cup after about 10 or 15 minutes, the cup goes into the waste paper bin. Fine, no problem, except I want you to think about something. Your journey, that coffee's journey, is now over. Done. 15, 20 minutes? It's now going to take that coffee cup 450 years to end its journey. Just think about that implication. This is why landfill sites are so overflowing with plastic. This is why our oceans are so overflowing, because once we throw it away, it doesn't just disappear. We are recycling some, but we're not recycling anywhere near as much plastic as we need to recycle, or reconstitute, or reprocess, whatever words you want to use. And because of that, because of our initial lack of knowledge, we have ended up with an environment that is dominated by plastic waste. But who do we blame? We've got to blame somebody, don't we? Well, do we blame the chemical plants? And what about the manufacturers? Surely they've got something to do with this. It must be their fault then, mustn't it? Well, if it's not the chemical plants and the manufacturers, then the retailers must be to blame, because, you know, they use so much plastic and demand from the manufacturers this plastic, which is, after all, so useful to everybody. Well, no. I mean, obviously the consumers are out there and they're demanding this use of plastic, because if they didn't use the plastic, the retailers wouldn't use it, in fact manufacturers wouldn't manufacture it, and the chemical plants wouldn't have anything to do. So, of course, it must be the consumer's fault. Is it? Well, it is and it isn't. You see, it's everybody. Everybody has found a way to use this wonderful material called plastic. I mean, the producers produce it because, in the chemical plants, because of the demand from the manufacturers. So the more demand, then of course they will try to accommodate that demand and use more and more oil to create more and more plastic. And the manufacturers, well, things are being demanded from the retailers. More and more innovative uses of plastic. You know, car manufacturers are using, aircraft manufacturers are using it. Everybody uses plastic. So, therefore, manufacturers step up to the plate and they produce the plastic that's needed. And as for the consumers, well, the consumers have been told how much plastic that they actually need. For health, for safety, pure convenience, all the plastic bags, although thankfully we're seeing a lot less plastic bags, but still it was very convenient to use those plastic bags. So really, when you think about it, whilst everybody is to blame, also nobody is to blame for the waste, because we didn't realise what was going to happen in that environment. As you can see here, there are some very, very good reasons for using plastic. It is very convenient. If we were to use other types of products, we couldn't manufacture them as cheaply or as light as they currently are. It's hygienic. You know, when you think the foodstuffs that are wrapped in plastic, it actually helps protect that product from decaying. So it's a very good use of that. You know, it has a very long lifespan, as we said, and it can be very, very strong. So, you know, some very, very good reasons. In fact, the health services of this world, for the food manufacturers of this world, couldn't produce what they're producing today without the use of plastic. Our whole society actually depends on the use of plastic. But on the other side, we all see the dumping of plastic on our streets all over the place. We see it in the oceans, we see it in landfills, we see it all over the place. You walk anywhere nowadays and within 3 or 4 minutes you will see plastic discarded, dumped. But we also know that plastic comes from a source that is finite. It's not sustainable to keep using plastic and simply throwing it away for it to decay over the next 450 to 1,000 years. It's just not sustainable. We know that. Of course, the contribution to global warming with the methane that's released from plastic that is starting to decompose. This and also the manufacture of so much plastic that also contributes to global warming. And as we all know, the endangerment to species, it says there. But one thing I want to make clear, and I'll probably repeat, is that should we get this wrong, and should the food chains start to disappear on us because of this, and should humankind go into decline, once humankind is no longer on the planet will survive, and, quite honestly, probably thrive a few million years after we've gone. So what we're trying to do here is help each other, help the human race, help all life on this planet. But the planet itself, well, that's fine. Something that's been discussed quite a lot over the last few years is the circular economy, and a way whereby we can use plastic and put it through a process so that instead of getting to end of life as in dumping plastic, we then use that plastic as feedstock into the whole manufacturing process so that we can completely reuse it again. And whilst 100% reusability is highly unlikely, the closer we can get to that 100%, the more we can actually continue to use the plastic. It just makes sense when you think about it logically. However, there are some difficulties, and we've all come across those difficulties. But it's not something we can't do something about today, and this is really the crux of the presentation. Because it says there, why aren't we doing it now? Well, I've got news for you. Some people are doing it now. We are often told that we are recycling plastic, and if you look at it, yes, we are recycling some plastic, but a lot of the local research has suggested that we're only recycling around 9% of the plastics that are currently being produced. What's more frightening, I think, is that only 2% of plastics are being recycled effectively. What does that mean? That means that it's 2% of plastics are then being reused within a process that is effective, that is useful. The other 7% is because we have to. And the end product isn't as strong as it would be if we weren't using those recycled plastics. So, because as we all know, plastics, the PET and LDPE plastics, they're the ones that can be mechanically recycled, but they can only be recycled once, maybe twice. So it's something we need to talk about, and how we process the plastics in order to be able to recycle them. Because one interesting fact is before China stopped the importing of plastics, the entrepreneurs within that country were starting to solve the problem of plastics. We know because we've been there, and we know because we've been talking to people who have left China and who are currently running successful businesses processing the hard to recycle plastics. So therefore the solution to this problem is to give all plastic waste a value. Imagine if you could give all plastic waste a value. You see, there is very little high-grade plastics out in landfill because it has a value. The PET, LDPE, thick types of plastic that can be mechanically recycled is purchased, is taken to sites, is reconstituted or recycled into plastics and sold. And it's sold at a higher value than when they brought it in, plus the production cost. Therefore, you have a sustainable business. But what they were doing in China and what people are doing in Southeast Asia at the moment is they're taking all those hard to process or recycle plastics, and they're putting it through a process that again is taking it back to its original state, as in oil. It's creating oil from a solution known as pyrolysis. A lot of people know about that, plus gasification, which we'll talk about in a little while. But the idea is, if you can get people within a society to collect the plastic that has value, that you can pay them for the collection of that, one, you'll start to get rid of the dumps of plastic that are around, and two, you'll start a whole economy, new economy, within those towns and villages. And let's face it, most of the plastic today has been dumped in areas that need economic growth. The very poor areas. This is a way. Isn't it ironic? What we have dumped there as our waste could end up being something that is a revelation to them and actually help them generate a whole economy and become a lot wealthier than they currently are. As I said earlier, man is very, very clever, but we all know nature is far cleverer when you think about it, what it's produced. Us, for example. But man, in his infinite wisdom, has come up with this wonderful compounds, the polymers, monomers and polymers, and created a whole chemical environment to be able to produce these new compounds. What nature does naturally, to use a want of a better word, is it takes whatever it generates and then repurposes it, recycles it, so that it can help generate more life. That's what nature is about. Unfortunately, these new compounds that we as man have developed in the last 100 years, and have been using them over the last 70 years, it's such a tiny space of time that nature hasn't had time to catch up, and maybe won't be able to catch up for tens of thousands of years yet. Which again is only a small amount of time as far as nature is concerned, but it can't reprocess these and return these compounds back into the earth because it knows nothing about them. So that leaves it, we created them, it leaves it for us to then reprocess it and take it back to its original form, because then we'll be copying nature. So what we do is we use the same process that developed the plastics in the first place to take them back to their original state as oil and carbon. There are many ways of doing that. There's pyrolysis, which, as we all know, is something we've been using to create the charcoal, for example. It's been going on for about 5,000 years, if not longer. Gasification, being able to put the plastics into extreme temperatures so that everything turns to a gas, and then we use the chemical reactions to draw off whatever chemicals that we want to from that. And of course there's much more research and development going on right now. There's one that I read about the other day, which is using microwave technology to break down the compounds of the polymers, and again to help then break it down to its original content. And that's really the answer to this, is taking it back to its original format. But I've said, this technology exists. It's something that I know many organisations are looking at, and have looked at, and are even developing. But there are many different ways that we can use this technology. We at People's Plastic Revolution want to use it to be able to take to micro units that can be put on in containers, to be able to take it to where the problem currently exists, so that we can process that plastic waste, generate wealth for the local community, and set up a whole economy going from that waste. So we're starting to get rid of the waste problem actually where it is. Many other organisations are looking at building mega sites so that they can take the waste and produce the oil from that waste, or produce products from that waste. And that's just a different way of looking at it. It's just size. And of course, gasification plants, I know, are being developed at the moment, and I'm sure in future there will be other solutions. I mean, one of the issues I hear people say about this is not a perfect solution. And I agree, it's not the perfect solution. But as my grandmother often said to me, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. This is a good solution. It's a good way of starting to turn the tide against plastic waste. The fact it's not perfect, don't let it stop us doing something good. So what is it that organisations can actually do? Well, the first thing I would say is, in the planning process, whenever a manufacturing plant is being developed, then there should be a whole process that goes around that has a recycling centre attached to it. Because let's face it, the feedstock is very, very cheap, if not free, of plastics. The cost comes in the collection, the sorting, the washing and the crushing of the plastics. The processing is not an expensive option, and of course that is an immediate feedback for the manufacturing process. So that would seem a natural way of doing it, and it would not add significant costs to a plant as you're initially building it. And again, why can't we put such facilities, recycling facilities, close to landfill sites, in landfill sites? And another one of my favourites is that, because of the issues we see in the oceans, what about designing a ship or ships to be able to go and collect that waste and then put it through a pyrolysis solution that is actually on board the ship? Wow. And how would you feed the pyrolysis? How would you heat it to its 450 degrees? You actually use the waste or the syngases that are actually coming from the whole process. It's actually very, very environmentally friendly. And here's the kicker. As you can see there, the solution is profitable. It might not be as profitable as only processing the PET or LDPE plastics, but it is profitable. People are making livings of this now. You can actually help people make livings, and you could actually make a profit from doing this. So it just needs the political will within your organisation. But there is a lot more we can do besides recycling, reconstituting the plastic waste, and a lot of that has got to do with education. Education of our children, teaching them what is good use of plastic and what is bad use of plastic. And let's face it, if we've got plastic that can be recycled easy, in collecting is very easy, for example, then we can continue to use some single-use plastics as long as it is recycled easily, taken back into the process and put through the system. So in actual fact, not using the the raw products once, we'll be using it many times. Imagine if some coffee cups were made of a very easy to recycle plastic. Just put your coffee cups in this bag. They don't go into landfills. We give there is a value to them. For example, you get a penny back whenever you bring them. Imagine all the children being able to collecting them and bringing all the coffee cups back. By adding that value, reprocessing them easily, it will create its own economy, and through that educating manufacturers not to put 2 or 3 or 4 lots of different types of plastics together, to come up with innovative ways of using one type of plastic. It may add a cost to the whole thing, but it won't be significant cost. And when you look at if it does add a cost, that cost is the cost of not throwing the plastic away. So that's really something that we really need to look at, and obviously continue to educate consumers. Very important. And more research and development needs to be done worldwide. We need to be able to finance some research and development, so not so that just to reduce the plastic waste that we're actually seeing, but the research and development, I am sure, will come up ways of organisations being able to reduce costs and increase profit. So everybody is going to win by this, which, let's face it, can't be bad for anybody, can it? So I would say, let's leave this to our future generations. It's our mess. It's the last 70 years that this has built, and in the last 30 years it has got out of control. We have actually, all of us, all the way from the chemical processing plants, manufacturers, retailers, consumers, used far too much of this resource, and it is time for us to start to clean up our mess. The fact that we're talking about this is a great step in the right direction. But if we want to leave our children, our children's children, their children, a beautiful planet, then we're going to have to do something about it. Let's see an environment free of plastic waste. And finally, the point of all this, as I've mentioned a number of times, and I make no excuse for it at all, remember, doing nothing is not an option. Look at these children, think about their children, think about their grandchildren, and then think about their grandchildren's children. We can start something great here so that they can live in a pollution-free world. Wouldn't that be a great legacy? And here is our contacts page. Please contact us so that we can talk, we can help each other not only do something about this and actually start some activity, not just talking, actually processing plastics, but we can also help educate the entire world as to what not only is being talked about, but is actually being done now. I would welcome the opportunity to talk to you at the earliest possible time, and many thanks for your time in watching this presentation. Thank you, and goodbye.